Welcome to the Drill Down, in-depth answers to oilfield questions. I'm John Spears.
And I'm Richard Spears.
So, Richard, we're filming this today. Those folks who are watching the podcast instead of listening to it are probably, the watchers are probably relieved that we don't have a map behind us that we're filling in with
red and blue.
That's right.
But did you watch last week's podcast
yes.
on the YouTube channel
Yes,
that we got, which is where they should be watching, because once again
we have high quality, top dollar graphics
we have
that we've
spared no expense, or we've gone to no expense.
one of the two.
But I watched it last week.
Yes.
And you know the old adage is the camera adds
and 25 pounds.
10 pounds. And I got to looking at it, it says, that looks like I've eaten 5 cameras.
Well, I've made my goal weight. I just haven't made my goal height. We watched a lot of graphics involving states last week, and
we did.
I actually have a question for you. Teaser, as it were.
A teaser.
I'll give you the answer at the end.
Okay.
I want you to
What's
come
my
up,
job in this? If you're going to give me the teaser.
Well, you try and come up with an answer.
Oh, I try to guess the answer.
So the answer is, what place in the U.S. where you can give the following directions? Go to the middle of the bridge and turn left.
Chappaquiddick.
No, there are no bridge there.
Oh.
So I'll give you that answer at the end.
That was what happened.
I thought about it as we were watching all the graphics. No, what we want to talk about this time.
Go to the end of the bridge or go middle of the bridge?
Middle of the bridge
and
turn left.
This cannot end well.
No, it's fine. So what we have behind us is a timeline.
So what you're going to tell me at the end?
Yes, right.
Not at the end of the question, at the end of the podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Can we get there quicker?
I hope so. So we have behind us a timeline which shows the quarter-to-quarter change in drilling activity internationally, so outside of North America.
Does it include Canada?
No, it does not include Canada. It's outside of North America.
North America. There you go. So does it include Mexico?
No, it doesn't. Oh, yes, it does, actually.
Because in the oil and gas business, Mexico is not in North America.
Yeah, South America starts at the river.
Don't tell the Mexicans.
Yeah. So, point is that we all know or remember that the international part of the patch behaves differently than what we see here in the U.S. when it comes to drilling activity.
It is generally a more muted response than the North American response.
That's right. We think about the volatility here in North America and how it's tied to the ups and downs of oil prices. And those same ups and downs in oil prices occur internationally, but we just don't see rig activity rise or fall very much.
The difference between, say, a bass boat on an Oklahoma lake and an ocean-going liner.
Yes.
They both can turn.
They're both on the water.
They're both on the water.
Good point. So this graph just shows the quarter-to-quarter change in rig count, as the folks at Baker Hughes put it together. And then the last little bit there is our own forecast of where rig count might change. And we go back to 2015, and we go quarter by quarter through 2021.
Because we're making a little bit of a forecast. We're forecasting the fourth quarter of this year and each of the quarters for next year.
Yes.
With regard to quarterly change from the prior quarter.
That's exactly right.
Yes. So what I'm seeing here, people who are watching this on the YouTube, they would notice a shocking event.
Right. So what you typically see is fairly small responses quarter to quarter. The graph shows we're sort of in this plus 5%, minus 5% range for most of this period of time, except for this year.
Because if international was going to change, it was going to change negative 3% and then negative 4%.
So a handy rule of thumb would be that oil prices change, and then it's about 6 months or a little bit longer before we begin to see a response take place on the international rig count side.
It's like the battleship. You turn the rudder, you do turn left, and in a little while, it begins to slowly turn.
And it's because the players abroad are just different. They're bigger, deeper pockets typically. To the extent they're national oil companies, they've got concerns about work programs and employment and so forth, and they just don't want to change that up and down very quickly. So that's part of the reason why most of the time on this particular chart here we saw very little change quarter to quarter. It's interesting when you think about 2015 and 16. So following the last price collapse, oil prices went from over 100, they bottomed out somewhere around 30, came back. Rig activity changed pretty small amounts, And if you sort of disaggregate the numbers, what you see is through 2015 and 16, and then 17 and 18, the Middle East barely saw any change in rig count at all.
They held the course.
1 or 2% up or down over the course of a year, just not much change. That's different this year. So
yeah, if you were seeing this on the YouTube,
right.
the difference in 2020 is startling.
Yes, so we had about a 20% drop from the first quarter of this year to the second quarter of this year. And then that followed up by about another 15% drop. The third quarter is down another, or fourth quarter I should say, is down another 10% or so. Now in the second quarter we saw a lot of rigs come off the active count because in South America there were a number of countries that, because of the pandemic, instituted work rules that basically prohibited people from going out to a rig and working. So a lot of rigs went idle there. And we began to see them kind of filter back in as some of the concerns about the virus have mitigated. But this third quarter, and again here in the fourth quarter, what's really different is that rig count in the Middle East has just fallen off a cliff. I mean, in this third quarter, we were down 20 to 40% country by country in the Middle East. So
yeah, say that number again.
Yeah, 20 to 40% quarterly
Each
changes.
quarter.
Yeah, absolutely, in individual countries. So, so that's a huge change from, you know, all these countries, whereas before in the Middle East, which had been keeping rig count very flat because they were sustaining or trying to grow their oil production. And so that's why they sustained drilling activity at those levels, right? Now they've backed off that kind of commitment and we're seeing rig count fall pretty tremendously. So
now, one of the things that as a forecaster you assume is that the behavior of the population you're studying is not going to just fundamentally change from the very same set of signals that they got the last time.
Oh, right.
So they're going to behave somewhat the same.
Sure.
And so you take how they behaved the last time.
That's like that's your status quo assumption right there. Right?
Yeah. And in a case like this, have you ever in the last 40 years seen a behavior in the international arena that looked remotely like this?
Well, no, not at all. Not at all. That kind of a sharp decline hasn't happened. I mean, basically we're looking at declines in the 3 quarters of 2020 that are in the books that capture all the decline that took us 2 years as an industry to see internationally.
So
last time. So
all the implications are fantastic, but here's a simple one. Is international now behaving like North America?
Is it?
Like right now, I'm going to immediately respond.
Right. And that's an open question. I don't know that we have
I don't know the answer
to that one yet. But I think the other way you might be able to interpret these changes is that in the past, when in the Middle East, say, the national oil companies wanted to sustain or grow their oil production capacity, they may have backed off that that goal now.
Got it.
And if that's the case, then that would they may look around and say, listen, I don't want to add another 1 million barrels a day capacity.
I've already got plenty.
That's right. So I don't need to run 50 rigs. I can run 30 rigs or something like that as a way of doing it. So this, I think, has implications for what longer term the capacity of some of the big exporting nations to where that capacity number will settle. Could be much lower than what it has been in the past several years.
So of this really dramatic change that we've seen, negative change, in 2020, what part of that negative change is represented by Saudi Aramco and by Kuwait and by the group of those Middle East?
Almost all the third quarter decline was concentrated in the Middle East.
And the third quarter decline is down 15% off of 1,000 rigs or so.
Well, the Middle East number was in the 400 range. So, so we're down. This year, here in the international counts, we'll average around 750 rigs. Today we're running around 600 rigs in the international market. Our guess would be that next year we'll grow from where we are today, 600 rigs, to around 650 rigs. So we'll be up about 10% over the course of 2021. But again, we're at 600 rigs today. We started the year at 400, or at 1,000. I'm sorry, we're down 400. So.
Yeah, so for those of us who are in oilfield service companies who have an international component and a domestic component, we're very used to having the domestic component just roar up and collapse, roar up and collapse.
Yeah.
And we've always relied on the international piece as this far more steady business where you can kind of count on that. You don't have to make changes quite as, dramatically.
Right.
But maybe now you do.
You might have to.
We certainly see Saudi Aramco behaving in a way over the last 5 or 10 years where they've been developing an infrastructure in their country of independent and locally owned oilfield service companies.
Right.
As opposed to just relying on Schlumberger, Halliburton, Baker Hughes.
Right.
And when you do that, are you setting up your country, just Saudi Arabia, but all the Middle East, to behave more like the U.S. and turn it up, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down?
Yeah.
I don't know, because one cycle does not a trend make, but maybe that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But what do you think this does to the ability of the entire globe to produce oil a year from now and 2 years from now?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we have to call into question certainly the plans that some of these countries have to get their oil output capacity numbers anyway up to 4 or 5 million barrels a day, or in the case of Saudi, 12 million barrels a day, because, and perhaps they're looking at the tea leaves, concerns about climate change and intentions to draw back on use of oil for transportation anyway, and saying this may not be a world that needs 120 million barrels a day of oil production. 10 years from now, it may be a world that needs no more than what we're using today, or perhaps less. And so why spend the big bucks to grow or sustain capacity and let it sort of naturally rise and fall using the price signals that we do here in the U.S. for that?
Speed it up, slow it down, and be a little more, be right on top of your gas pedal and your brake, and adjust accordingly.
Yeah, right. So before we sign off, I know you're wondering, what's the answer to that question?
I don't even remember what the question was.
Where can you go to the middle of the bridge
and turn left? Other than Chappaquiddick, I do not know where.
So you got to have a bridge. Oh, yeah. This is the one place in the U.S. where you can cross a bridge and stay on the same side of the river. So, and that place is Zanesville, Ohio.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Give me a slide. What you have here in Zanesville.
All right, this is where John is adding a graphic.
Together. So you have the Licking River here, the Muskegon River here. And you have a bridge that starts there, goes there, and there.
You have
so you
got
can cross
to be
bridge, turn left, and you're still on the same side.
Still on the same side of the river. This is why people listening on to the streaming service are all migrating over to our YouTube channel, because you get to see this graphic. If I hadn't seen it with my own 2 eyes, I would not.
You wouldn't believe it. Anyway,
Zanesville, Ohio.
Thanks so much for watching or listening. This has been the Drill Down. I'm John Spears.
And I'm Richard Spears.